In the early hours of Halloween 2020, the small, quiet town of Hemphill, Texas, was forever changed. It was a night when the veil between the living and the dead seemed to blur. A night that would end with a tragedy no one could have foreseen. The name Livy Lewis would soon be etched into the memories of everyone who lived there. But her story, the story of her death, remained shrouded in mystery and suspense. But who could have possibly known that such a vibrant young woman would be taken so suddenly? Livy had only just turned 19. She was bright, kind-hearted, and full of potential. A straight-A student, a recent high school graduate, and a woman with a future that seemed endless. She had a scholarship to a local college. Her path was clear, and she was loved by everyone who knew her. But that Halloween night, Livy's life came to a violent and unexpected end. Her body was discovered slumped over the steering wheel of her car, the victim of a gunshot wound to the neck. The call came in just before dawn, and what followed would be a series of events that no one could have predicted. Livy's mother, Darcy Bass, received a call she'll never forget. Her heart sank as a friend informed her of the tragic news. Livy had been shot. In the blink of an eye, Darcy's world was shattered. But what happens when a tragedy like this defies all logic and explanation? She didn't know if her daughter was alive or dead. She didn't know if it was all some sort of mistake. All she could do was plead for answers. "Where's my child?" she asked, her voice thick with panic. "I just needed to know, is she alive or is she dead?" But it wasn't until later, when she arrived at the scene, that the full weight of the tragedy hit her. Livy's lifeless body was found in her car, and the shocking truth was now undeniable. Livy's death was senseless. She was a girl who had everything ahead of her, a girl who was kind, loving, and selfless. She had dreams of becoming a nurse, driven by a passion for caring for others. But her life was cut short, and her family was left in a state of disbelief. Livy was a perfect child, one person said, struggling to hold back tears. She was kind, she was loving. She was a person who always put others first. That's why she went into nursing. She had something about her that made her want to take care of people. But how does someone with such a pure heart become the victim of such a senseless tragedy? As the investigation into Livy's death unfolded, authorities turned their focus to the last person known to be with her, Matthew Edgar. He was her ex-boyfriend, but their complicated relationship was far from over. It was a relationship filled with highs and lows, jealousy and manipulation. They had been together, then apart, then back together. The cycle was unhealthy, but somehow they found themselves tangled once more on the night of her death. Matthew had been drinking heavily on the night of Halloween 2020. He had been at a party, watching Livy and Montana, his ex-wife, socialize. But he wasn't included. His jealousy had begun to simmer. He wasn't over Livy. He couldn't stand the thought of her moving on without him. What happens when jealousy, anger, and alcohol collide? Could they have played a role in Livy's death? Matthew's actions that night would soon become the center of a web of mystery. According to his own story, Matthew had no recollection of what happened after the party. He claimed that he drank so much that he blacked out. The next thing he remembered was waking up in the back of an ambulance. When Matthew was found, he was discovered in the fetal position, behind Livy's car. Blood covered his face, but strangely, he had no injuries. Investigators were baffled. There was a rifle nearby, along with a pair of shoes and a hat. Items that didn't seem to belong to anyone else. What happened? Why was Matthew covered in blood? And most importantly, what role did he play in Livy's death? Matthew's story didn't make sense. How could he be so bloodied and yet have no injuries? How could he remember nothing of the events leading up to Livy's death? And what about the rifle? Was it his? Was it connected to her death? These questions would linger throughout the investigation, casting shadows of doubt on Matthew's innocence. Matthew's ex-wife, Montana, had a strange relationship with Livy. At first, they didn't get along. Montana was jealous of the young woman who was involved with her ex-husband. But then something shifted. Montana and Livy became friends. They talked often, and Montana seemed to think of Livy as someone she could trust. But was this really friendship, or was it something more sinister? Did Montana have a motive for what happened that night? As the investigation progressed, Montana's role became increasingly suspicious. Matthew's mother, Cindy, suggested that someone else might have been involved in Livy's death. Some speculated that it could have been Montana. Her relationship with Matthew and the jealousy that had festered between the two women made her a person of interest. The question now, who pulled the trigger? Sheriff's investigator J.P. McDonald didn't rule out the possibility of other people being involved. He was sure that Matthew was hiding something. Evidence from the crime scene pointed to Matthew's involvement, but there were also gaps. DNA evidence suggested the presence of another man, someone who had been with Livy that night. As investigators dug deeper, they found more evidence that raised questions about Matthew's involvement. No fingerprints or DNA were found on the gun that killed Livy, which seemed strange. Was it possible that someone else had killed Livy while Matthew was unconscious? Or was he lying to protect himself, or someone else? Every question seemed to lead to more confusion. Then there was the critical moment when Matthew returned to the scene of the crime. Why would he go back? What was he trying to accomplish? The very fact that he returned to the scene made no sense unless he knew something. Something that could point directly to his guilt. Was it a slip that could unravel the mystery? Or was it yet another thread in a story that only seemed to get more tangled? Just hours after Livy's death, Matthew had made another critical decision. He went back to the crime scene, this time in his cousin Zach's truck. Why would he return? Was he trying to erase evidence, or was he trying to cover up his involvement in a crime he could no longer hide? And there was Montana, who didn't call 911 when Matthew texted her saying Livy was dead. Instead, she chose to stay quiet. Was she in on it, or was she too afraid to act? The investigation continued to unfold, but the truth remained elusive. While Matthew Edgar had been the prime suspect from the beginning, doubts began to surface. Some believed Matthew was not the killer. Some thought someone else, like Montana, might have pulled the trigger. But one thing was clear: Matthew and Montana were both tangled in a dangerous web of lies, jealousy, and obsession. In the end, the question remains: who killed Livy Lewis? We may never know the full truth of that tragic night. But one thing is certain: Livy Lewis's life was stolen too soon. The promise of her future, the dreams she held, ended in the blink of an eye. And those who knew her will never forget the girl with the kind heart, the girl who wanted to make the world a better place, the girl who deserved so much more. The blackout murder of Livy Lewis will haunt the small town of Hemphill for years to come. The truth may never fully surface, but the questions will remain. And for Livy's family, the search for answers continues. This was the story of Livy Lewis. Who killed Livy Lewis? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear: the truth is still out there. A story of loss, justice, and the enduring love of a mother. And as the years go on, we will remember her, as Darcy hopes, for the girl who brought light to everyone she met.